It is indeed a great pleasure and honor to be able to introduce our keynote speaker today, Professor Masazumi Wakatabe, who is full professor at the Faculty of Political Science and Economics at the School of Economics at Waseda University. Professor Wakatabe has a distinguished academic career, as well a very distinguished professional career as Vice President of the National Society of the as a Deputy Governor of the Bank of Japan from March 2018-2023. But he has been, as I said, also involved in a very prestigious academic career as a visiting scholar at Cambridge University, George Mason University, Columbia University Center for Japanese Economic and Management, and he has been also Vice President of the National Society for the History of Economics in Japan. He has quite a remarkable record of important books, which include studies on the Showa Depression, who got the Nikkei Economic Book Award, Economic Policies and Crisis, who got the Ishibashi Tanzan Prize, and what perhaps is his most famous book, Japan's Great Stagnation in Economics, 2015. I would like to stress that this is an important book, because in this book, Professor Wakatabe shows that Japan's great stagnation in economics reveal the striking similarities of economic events and policies between the Great Stagnation and the Great Recession. He suggests possible danger ahead and way out in the future, and his views are based on Professor Wakatabe's expertise in economic history, in the history of economics idea, and what is peculiar of his approach is to the argument that any policy decision is related to cultural ideology. And then I would like to quote also a recent work by Professor Wakatabe, in which he discusses the evolution of what became known as the macroeconomics after the Depression, in terms of an ongoing debate among stabilizers and their critics. And what is interesting that in order to analyze this problem, he uses four perspectives or school of thought as measure to locate the evolution and transformation: the gold standard mentality, liquidationism, the treasury view, and the real being drafting. So by highlighting these four economics idea, he argues that what happened during the Great Depression was the retreat of the gold standard mentality, the complete demise of liquidationists and the treasury views, and the strange survival of the real being doctrine. And this is his major point, that each of these transformations happened not in response to internal debates in the discipline, but in response to government policies and real-world events. So we are having here the privilege of having someone who combined the scholarship as a historian of economic thought and the experience and a manager of a great institution. So please welcome Professor Wakatabe.
Thank you. It's quite an honor to be here, and there are only a few people whose offer I cannot refuse, turn down on this planet. And one of them is Sandy. So Sandy asked me to come here, so I have no choice but to say yes. So that's why I'm here. So for this crowd, my message is, of course, history matters, ideas matter, history of ideas matters to understand the economy. So I don't think I have to convince you, actually, about my main message, but just hear me out, how I address this problem. I will use two examples. One is what's known as the great enrichment. That's Theodore McCloskey's favorite word to describe the progress of or prosperity of the humankind. And second one is more related to my own subject. That's the Great and Lesser Depressions. So Japan's Great Stagnation, that's my sort of expertise. Now, I'm an accidental central banker. So I didn't want to become a central banker. So I have been an academic, and I started as a Smith scholar. So that in that sense, that's it's just a coincidence and circumstances that I became the deputy governor of the Bank of Japan. I had three mentors at Waseda days. I graduated from Waseda, and the one teacher, the mentor, is Kazuo Uehara, who is not known among you, but he gave me a very interesting set of ideas. He said first that as a historian of economics, you're going to have to know something about economics, obviously. Secondly, however, as a social scientist in Japan, you should pay attention to the problems, social scientific problems in Japan. So that's a very nice idea for me. But thirdly, that's after all, you're a historian of economic thought, so you're going to have to pay close attention to classic texts, the primary sources. So that set of ideas are still with me. And I went to Toronto as a graduate student, and Sam Hollander was my supervisor, and David Lederer actually taught one full-year course. The only full-year course he taught about history of economic thought. I was privileged to be at that class. And David actually told me another set of advice, that that's thinking about Samuel Hollander's approach. Samuel Hollander, takes text very seriously, and he takes a kind of consistency in a thinker very seriously. But David said that you're going to have to do your own work. Okay, so besides your history of economic thought, then you would realize that it's very difficult to maintain your consistency. So it's also a nice idea. I think that I got from David. Now, I had a research interest about knowledge and economic development, which is related to the first part of my talk. And also I have been teaching the history of economic thought. And I became the vice president of the HES from 2016 to 2017, not in Japan, but here. And in the meanwhile, but I got involved in sort of economic controversies surrounding the Japan's Great Stagnation, and deflation. So that's why I got involved in a sort of semi or quasi or even pseudo public intellectual activities. So I actually shifted my research interest from the knowledge and economic development to economic crisis and economics. Obviously, I faced the economic crisis in Japan, so I changed my subject. And I'll talk about that later. I accidentally become the central banker, the deputy governor of the Bank of Japan. So I will use this my story as a kind of it's case to illustrate my point. So I don't think my life itself is not interesting, but I don't think it's not interesting. But my life is not interesting, but I like to use my life story as a kind of the case to prove my point. Okay. I'd like to have some, the Q&A session after my talk, so I'll skip some slides. But let me just say that there is the growing interest in many things about beliefs, culture, and ideas in the mainstream economic literature. So culture, now of course, and trust, morality, the social capital, religion, and endogenous formation of preferences, beliefs. They are the sort of frontier of the recent economic research. And when I think about when it comes to the history, I can point out several things, but three things stand out. One is the so-called hysteresis. So some shock happens to the economy, but that shock is kind of lingering for a long time. And clearly, of course, the idea of culture has the idea of persistence and hysteresis. And also contingency. We all know that the 1962 Cuban crisis, we are on the verge of all-out nuclear warfare. But by just coincidence and by just accident, we barely, avoided that kind of catastrophe. The Stephen Daroff at the University of Chicago wrote a very nice review about two books which I'm going to introduce now. And in that review, he said that suppose that nuclear warfare happened in 1962, then all signs about the cross-sectional economic analysis got reversed. So that's the great enrichment turned out to be the great failure of the mankind. So the contingency really matters in history. And also the stasis followed by rapid change. So even though we see some persistence or hysteresis, sometimes that is going to change very suddenly. Okay? So there are several components we have to think about when we think about history. Now, hysteresis is just this example. By the way, I think the US economy is a kind of exception to this story, up until the Great Recession. Okay. So remarkably, I think the US economy has been growing at a kind of steady pace. Okay. Then, that great global financial crisis happened, and followed by the Great Recession. We see some actual hysteresis, even for the US economy. Okay. Now, the first story, the great enrichment. Obviously, we know that something happened around this period, and we are, becoming more and more prosperous. And how to understand this great enrichment? The Stephen Daroff wrote a review article for the Journal of Economic Literature, recent one. And he reviewed two books, Comilla and Rubin's How the World Became Rich, and the DeLong's book, Slouching Towards Utopia. And he, this is the gist of the Comilla and Rubin, but I'll skip that. So what he said is that Comilla and Rubin, the book is really good, even-handed. It's like a textbook. But lacking in discussing framework and other things, like the role of contingency, the role of the scientific revolution. DeLong was very good in discussing the failure of the Soviet Union and the importance of contingency. And also it was good to place ideas at the center of the story. But Daroff didn't buy DeLong's juxtaposition of Hayek versus Polanyi. Okay, so he thought that there has to be more important people, the economist or the thinker, than Polanyi. Okay, so he thinks that, for example, Hobhouse or John Rawls, for that matter, to have two intellectuals to think about this period. Okay. But what is to be done? He said that we need to have more explicit attention to high-dimensional nonlinear stochastic processes in his theoretical term. And he moves toward the complex analysis as an understanding, as a tool to understand the history. So that's the multiple steady state emergence phase transition. So that's his take. I'll come back to that. Okay, about the growth theory. I must say that's a sorry state of growth theory. And this is not my word. These are words coming from the top economists, like Banerjee and Duflo. The deep mechanism of persistent economic growth remain elusive. And Daroff himself said that to an unhealthy extent, the economic growth literature does not provide such a vision. the vision of the path toward the modern economic development that simultaneously describes important empirical contours of these changes and provides a serious interpretative framework that respects the complexity of the phenomena under study. So plenty of things to be done for the growth front, that's for sure. Okay. So my suggestion is the Roman-Mokyr-Macrosky nexus. Darlaf suggests Roman and Mokyr. Okay. The strange thing is that economic historians do not really refer to David Romer, Paul Romer. And the economic historians tend not to refer to Paul Romer. So there is a kind of disconnect. Okay. But also that from the historians of economic thought, we should take Deirdre's work more seriously. I think we are taking her work very seriously, but we should take her work more seriously. Okay. In kind of inputting more history of ideas component to understand the long contour of economic growth. Okay. So the reason is that anything else but we need to have the sustained knowledge accumulation, okay, to have the sustained economic growth. And so the creation of knowledge is quite important part. It's the one of the central mechanism to have sustained economic growth. So that's the Darlaf's suggestion is to have Roman-Mokyr nexus, and my suggestion is to have to incorporate the Macrosky's work. Now I'd like to, so these are interesting, but I must skip. I mean, that's the when we talk about culture, there are dangers of cultural expectations. So just briefly, that's the what was said about the Japanese. Okay, the Japanese are a happy race and being content with little, are not likely to achieve much. That was in 1881. Okay. So, by the way, the Commodore Perry, who came to Japan to bang the door and open Japan to the greater world, said this much: the Japanese are an exceedingly industrial people, and in certain manufacturing are surpassed by no nation. Okay, so it's very difficult to say that Japanese culture can be interpreted in one way only. So that should have sort of multiple interpretations. So there is a question about it. Okay, when it comes to Japan's great enrichment, I don't want to go through the whole detail. But what we can say is that what I would like to focus is that there was a kind of trend to have the more open communication of ideas during the Edo period. The Edo period was not the enlightened one, and from time to time the Edo shogunate suppressed the discourse and suppressed the freedom of expression. But there was the growing the credit and market economies. So that with that, there was the exchange of ideas happening. Okay. So, however, the Japan, after the full opening in 1853 and the Meiji Restoration in 1868, still poor. Okay, up until the 1880s. Okay, so, and the catch-up began after that. So some economists are calculating static gains from the free trade. The free trade was imposed on Japan. So, and that much, the 8 to 9% of GDP could be attributed to the free trade. Okay. Also, however, the other scholars like Sassman and Yaffe said that the great majority of the Meiji reforms produced no quantitatively significant market response. They went through the price of Japanese JGB's yield And they thought that with the exception of the two things, that the Japanese market responses are not so impressive. Okay, so the Harvard dynamic gains, that's where the U.S. Sakabe and Weinstein's 2024 paper came in. So they show that after a while, the government first collected tax. Okay, so this is the land tax, and use that money, revenue, to absorb technical knowledge from abroad. Okay, so they had a bunch of bureaucrats turned translators, and they busy translating technical books from the abroad. So you can see a sort of jump in the codified technical knowledge in Japan. You had Sakabe and Weinstein codified the sort of the knowledge by consulting and counting the number of books in the world, libraries in the world. Okay, so that, and they found out that after the 1980s, after the 1870s, they have found out that the Japanese books in technical knowledge have increased, jumped actually. Okay. So, and the Japanese created words to translate the technical knowledge into Japanese. Okay. So you can see that after the opening, you can see the number of words created increased. And after a while, the share of manufacturing in export soared in Japan. So that was the beginning of the Japan becoming a manufacturing nation. Okay. So there is nothing sort of the inherent to the Japanese to become a manufacturing nation. So there were lots of sort of efforts to do so. Okay. Now, that was their work, and one thing I'd like to do, not necessarily complete it, is to trace the absorption of the economic knowledge to Japan. So if you think that there's an article, and you can see the same pattern. Okay. So economic books are also translated into Japanese this period on. So it coincided with the increase in the translation of technical books into Japanese. Okay. Now, I haven't yet done a lot of work, but it started with John Stuart Mill's On Liberty. And actually, David Ricardo's book was translated as late as 1921. But in between that, we had Fawcett, Mill, Marsas, and Bastille, Jevons, and of course Smith, and Alfred Mary, Perry Marshall, Rochelle, Bastille again, Liszt, Luigi Cossa, Jevons, and Marx. Okay, and lots of economic tracts were translated within a very short period of time. Okay. So there's a research topic, I think, for us, for me at least, to think about this diffusion of ideas in Japan in a more systematic way. Okay. So it's very good thing to have a plenary speeches that I don't have to give answers. I just have to give you the problems. Okay. By the way, this is the Japanese sake named The Wealth of Nations. Yeah, because the first translator of The Wealth of Nations came from the Japanese sake brewer. And that brewery still exists. And so to honor the ancestor that they have this Japanese sake, I taste it, it's good. Okay. Okay. Economics culture in Japan. I'd like to talk a little bit about that. It's different from you guys have. Okay. So about the history of economic thought, I have just been at the roundtable session about the historiography of economics. Unlike here, the history of economic thought has been or was an integral part of the economic curriculum. Because you cannot really understand, for example, as a textbook without knowledge of the context. So that's so the history of economics thought has been the core of the economics education up until I would say 1990s. Okay, now we are now kind of catching up with the American and European tradition. So that's the history of economics has been increasingly marginalized. Okay. And strong Marxian influence up until the 1980s. I don't have time to talk about it, but it's also an interesting phenomenon. And the strong presence of business and government economists, economic commenters without formal training. I think here the economic analyst or business economist must go to the graduate school in economics, okay, and to have some training in economics. Do they use it is a different question, but I think that for Japan, that's not really the case up until now. So that's we do have a lot of economic commentators independent of the economic idea, the academicians. Okay. And also, we have been producing many economics major graduates. So that's the departments of economics has been considered as salarymen producing department. So that we do have a lot of economics graduates in Japan. Okay, without knowing much about economics, that's the question. Okay. Okay, and also media outlets. So we do have economic and business newspapers and economic and business popular journals. You do have, I think but we have more than that. And we have books, like the Shinsho and Bunko. It's more like the very short introduction type slim volumes. And they are quite influential in terms of propagating the economic ideas. Okay. And also we do have business and economic novels. Okay. If I have time, I'll come back to that point. Okay. Okay. Going back to the history of thought, given the current status situation of a growth theory we have, actually that gives us an opportunity to dig up some old ideas. And some ideas are not yet fully incorporated into the mainstream economics. In fact, I think that some part of the mainstream economics thinking would prohibit from absorbing those ideas. So that here is just another list, but I think that we still can talk about those ideas in understanding the great enrichment or the economic growth process. I'm not going to go through to that the process in details. Okay. Okay. The second part, Great and Lesser Depressions. This is also a vast area of the economic policy making or the policy making in general. Lots of literature is there, and also some extensions. The one simple presentation is like that: events, ideas, and actions are in the kind of loop. So that we have to, to think about three things together. So it's not necessarily the events and policy or action are just connected directly. We do have an intermediary, like ideas. So that ideas matter in forming the action, and vice versa. Okay. Okay. Japan's great stagnation. Okay. The first thing is that was a long and persistent stagnation, accompanied with mild but persistent deflation. Okay. So cumulative losses are kind of greater than the US Great Depression or the Great Depression in Japan back in the 1930s. Okay. Causes, we had a lot of controversy, and that controversy has not yet died down. That due to macroeconomic policy failures, or is that because of the structural problems the Japanese economy has? So that's why that's the answer to this question. What caused the Japan's great stagnation really depends on the lens which the analysts use. Okay. And also the controversies are part of the problem. Okay. So if you have, if you cannot really decide what the cause is, then you cannot really come up with the right course of action, the so-called right course of action. So that's that's ideas to action actually mattered during this Japan's Great Depression period. Okay, so this is the secular stagnation of Japan's Great Depression. So you can see some sort of kinks here, and the Japanese economy has not yet recovered to the pre-crisis trend. Okay, so the crisis has been long and persistent. By the way, this is the U.S. case. After the Great Depression, the U.S. actually recovered around 1940s. Okay, hysteresis I have already shown. I'd like to mention a couple of things about social costs of deflation. For example, suicides went up with the rise in unemployment rate. So that was a painful period. And also what we call the lost generation in Japan, or employment ice age is the word we use. And we are still dealing with this problem because this generation is turning to now hitting the 50s. Okay, so that's they are now facing the after work period. So how can we sustain them is a big question. Okay. About controversies during crisis, I just take J.S. Mill's word very to my heart. Okay, so it's you can really see the light through the tunnel. So it's a complicated process. So we're gonna have to live with that process. Now, how I got involved in controversies. 1997, I went back to Tokyo from Toronto, and that was honest horrible for the Japanese economy. So the financial crisis happened in Japan after, let's say, 1930s. Okay, and lots of things went sour. Okay, at that time, I must say that I was not that interested in that particular event. 20th century economics has produced that economists who can afford not to care about the real economy. So that's I was one of them. So I didn't have to care about what's happening in the real world. But at one point of time, when I was teaching the introduction to macroeconomics, I suddenly noticed, to encourage students or to motivate students, I turn to newspapers and magazine articles and to get just a sense of what's going on in the Japanese economy. And I realized that suddenly that lots of stuff are, trash or garbage, long-headed. So that's I was kind of struck by the low quality of that. So I began kind of pursuing that phenomena and try to understand what was going on in the media discourse, not necessarily on the event itself. Okay. And I began got involved in the controversies myself. Okay. So I switched my the research interest to the Great Depression era and the Japanese counter of the Great Depression in the 1930s. It was called the Showa Depression. And I found that, as Christina beautifully summarized, that there were sort of a contest of ideas during this period. So that I found myself in the sort of similar situation as the economists were in the Great Depression time. Okay? And also the premature death of Keynesian economics during this period is quite interesting because Japan had the deflationary recession during this period. But somehow Keynesian economics was sidetracked in the academic debate. So that's also interesting. Now, to understand this period, I really want you to read my book. Okay. So maybe I can skip that, but I will try to give some sense. Okay. So as Christina mentioned, that there are at least 4 ideas, but I can add more. So liquidationism to anti-growth sentiment were there. Okay, so that's the so lots of ideas are contesting with each other, okay, during this period. Okay. And my colleagues and myself discovered the reflationists back in the 1930s. So the Irving Fisher and the Japanese economic journalist Tanzan Ishibashi are the reflationists during the 1930s. So my colleagues and I were called the reflationists during this Japan's controversies. Okay. We had a very good input from abroad, starting from Paul Krugman's paper, Ben Bernanke, and also Lars Svensson. Basically, to reflate the economy, we had 3 strategies, and they were already laid out by 2020. Sorry, it's not 2022, 2002. Okay, so but the BOJ and the government did not act on that, so that's the problem. So let me see what else I can show. So this is my colleague and my predecessor of the deputy governor of the Bank of Japan, Kikuo Iwata. And he was an active participant in public economic discourse and became critic of the Bank of Japan as early as 1992. Why 1992? I will show you. And he became the deputy governor of the Bank of Japan before I became. Okay. And he got his ideas from several research. One is the John Maynard Keynes' writings during the Great Depression time, okay, before he published the general theory. So basically what Keynes said was that the long-term interest could still be lower. So that the BOE, the Bank of England, should engage in, buying up long-term bonds to lower the long-term yields. Okay, so that clearly has some influence in the Japanese monetary policy making afterwards. Okay, and also Friedman Schwartz. Even you cannot lower interest rate, you can always create money. So money growth has plummeted. So we're going to have to revive the money growth. Okay. And also what we call the international view of the Great Depression. So we're going to have to think about the Great Depression as a kind of regime. And to get out of the Great Depression, you have to have the regime change in policy. Okay. Okay. So this is the interest rate stuck in 0 for a long time. And also there was a drop in money growth, so around this early 1990s. Okay. So some people, Japanese commentators, noticed that something was wrong with the policy. Okay. And even after the short-term interest rate became 0, you can have still a positive long-term interest rate, so that we could still work on that kind of thing. Okay. By the way, this is my foray into popular economics. It's called the Economist Michelin What does it mean? It's like a Michelin restaurant guide. So I, with my two co-authors, we, listed and ranked the economic commentators, like the restaurants. So this commentator is good, this commentator is not so good, and so on and so forth. This book sold well, but I got kind of ostracized by this. So, so I made a lot of enemies. And in fact, I was also ranked in 2009 by someone, economic journalist, and I'm here. So my ranking is BAA3, like a Standard Poor ranking. And if you see that these things, I got a 0 point. So so that's the kind of the atmosphere you are in. Do I regret that? It's a difficult question. I mean, that's I can reread history. So, but I thought it was necessary. Okay, so I'm learning very quickly. Okay. Of course, global financial crisis happened, and the BOJ didn't react very well, to say the least. When the other central banks engaged in massive monetary easing, the Bank of Japan didn't. So that showed up in the appreciation of the yen. We are talking about now the depreciation of the yen, but that was back then it was appreciation of the yen. And also there was the Great East Japan earthquake. So that the things are going from bad to worse. Then came this man, Mr. Shinzo Abe, and his first term ended in disaster. So he was a prince of one faction of the LDP. So he had much hope and expectations, but he ruined those expectations, and he exited from the prime ministership miserably. But then several things happened, like the global financial crisis and Great East Japan earthquake, so that he got energized and to tackle the second term. And it turns out that he succeeded in becoming the prime minister second time. And during this, the wilderness year, he started to listen to the reflationist ideas. So that the reflation ideas, I must say, are not the majority of the Japanese economists. But in a sense that he got acquainted with that idea, and that is the beginning of Abenomics. Monetary policy developments, I'll skip that. And this is the boss I served while I was the deputy governor. He's a very interesting person. I cannot just resist this episode. And he loves Karl Popper, and he loves philosophy. But actually, he translated several articles of Karl Popper's during his undergraduate years. So his interest in logical positivism the Popperian falsificationism goes back to his undergraduate year. And he loves economics. He knows economists like Ben Bernanke, Mario Draghi, Janet Yellen. So he embraced the kind of the ideas Paul Krugman and Ben Bernanke and Russell Benson advocated. And he got appointed as the governor of the Bank of Japan. Abe appointed that. So the rest is kind of history. One episode I just cannot resist introducing is that he got MPhil in economics at the University of Oxford. That was quite rare because he graduated from the Faculty of Law at the University of Tokyo. And he became the Ministry of Finance official. So usually they don't go to the graduate school in economics, but he loved economics so much, so that he went to Oxford. And John Richard Hicks was already retired, but he had a seminar. And at that seminar, he encountered this conversation. Bank of England, the personnel present something, and the Hicks always kind of summed up what was going on during that seminar. And his summation was that, his summary was that the reason why the change in the bank rate in the BOE's term works is that precisely because there is a kind of the commitment by the BOE to pursue that policy. So the commitment to a policy action is really important. Okay, so that comes back to his BOJ period. Okay, so we have ended deflation, we have recovered employment, so on and so forth. Okay, I don't have time to talk about my 5 years at the Bank of Japan, but this is a summary. Okay. Okay, why? Because I got appointed March 2018. March 2020, the pandemic happened. And the February 2022, the Russian invasion of Ukraine happened. So, by the way, the last week of my appointment, the Silicon Valley Bank went bankrupt. So it's a series of crisis after crisis. But I have to say that maybe this was initially what I thought. That the BOJ could fight against deflation quite easy. But it's in the middle. I think that's the talk for my later, I think, developments. Okay, for this cloud, I have to say a couple of words about that. The central bank culture, okay, or the Bank of Japan culture. First of all, central banks have their own culture, as you know that. So, the central bankers are like the member of the club. Okay, and they interact with each other. And they have their own sort of intellectual sort of tradition. And tradition really matters. And it matters in a national context. Okay. For the Bank of Japan, it's the part of the Japan's bureaucracy. Okay. So in that sense, the economics part is weaker than in Japan, in the BOJ, than in for example, Fed or the ECB. So more lawyers we have than economists. Okay. And also we have the sort of the BOJ has the institutional memory and ideas. So the BOJ view resembles the real Bill's doctrine. Okay. And it looks closer to the BIS view, if you care to know about that. And central bank independence, that the standard understanding about the central bank independence is that the central banks usually have instrumental independence, but not goal independence. The BOJ claims that the central bank, the BOJ as central bank has the goal independence as well. Okay, so that gives a sort of strong sense of independence. That's why Mr. Abe came in to appoint another guy from outside to change policy. Okay. Another thing is my interaction with Japan's economics culture. This is a business novel called Exit. Okay. And we have a very rich tradition of business novels in Japan. Okay. And some modeled after me was featured in this novel. Okay. And that someone is very popular economics professor, turned to become the deputy governor, and he had an extramarital affair with his secretary at the BOJ, at the hotel nearby the BOJ, okay, in the neighborhood of the BOJ, okay. And that that person got caught on camera or something, and that initiates a kind of scandal. Okay, so that was sort of the beginning of this novel, and that person had to resign, And that reveals sort of the crisis in monetary policy making. Okay. I still don't understand which part I should feel offended. Okay. But this novelist criticized the BOJ policy very heavily. Okay. So we were already implementing a negative interest rate policy, which is hugely unpopular. Okay. Because the deposit rate for the household did not go into the negative territory, but negative interest rate is very negative in its name. So it has a very sort of disturbing connotations. Okay. And so he criticized that, and he portrayed some bankers, female bankers, committed suicide because of that negative interest rate policy. I couldn't really, tell is that the fact or not, but that's the whole line. But that novel itself didn't do well because after a while the real pandemic happened, so that the plot of this novel went astray. Okay. My lessons. I actually posted that at the last month as a deputy governor of the BOJ. So you can still see some reflections on Japan's economic monetary policy and the Bank of Japan on the homepage of the BOJ. Now, for this cloud, I would elaborate several things. The first, I kind of have more appreciation of economics. I mean, that's naturally, I think that economics is not perfect, but we do need something to think about policy. And the economics is usually always helps me. Okay. But it's better to let go what these guys said, master model mentality. Okay. So that you shouldn't think that one model rules them all. Okay. So that's why we should be really kind of flexible and receptive to ideas. Now, for example, the ESG, it's good as far as it goes, but it has several problems. So, for example, it could not estimate the impact of global financial crisis. Okay, if you happen to read the Doing Farmers Making Sense of Chaos, there's a story about New York Fed actually estimates the impact of global financial crisis before the crisis happened. Okay, using the DSGE, and they couldn't come up with sort of the realistic number. Okay. And also the inflation expectations. So that they assume that the DSG models just assume that the inflation rate goes to the target. Okay. But what the BOJ and I and my colleagues were struggling at that time was to stabilize inflation rate at a 2% level. Okay. So that the ESG model does not really answer our problems. Okay. Oh. I only have 3 minutes. very, very serious, 3 minutes. Okay. So let me just tell just one thing. This one, money. Okay. So I am a student of David Lader, so I couldn't help noticing that. So when the standard macroeconomists talk about nominal rigidities, obviously that should assume the money as the means of payment, okay, exchange. So obviously you have to think about the role of money, okay. But on that front, that we are still struggling. Okay, I live here, and I have 2 minutes to answer, 3 minutes to answer questions. And okay.
I hope it's fundamental. Please.
Hi, I'm André. I'm a young scholar from Brazil. Just a quick question. Thanks for the presentation. Professor, you talked about the importance of knowledge, growth, or development. What's the importance of academic freedom or academic autonomy in this process? Thank you.
Oh, well, of course, the answer is yes. Well, I think that's you don't have to consult John Stuart Mill. Oh, actually, the mic is here. Okay, yeah. So you don't have to reread John Stuart Mill on liberty. So that's the kind of the basic point. Yeah, it's so even you have the freedom expression, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have the right idea, the so-called right idea. But that's the whole point. You're going to have the conversations and the controversies. Okay, but it's now of course that I understand that that's painful. Yeah, during the crisis time, I mean, that's the controversies are just a part of the problem. Yeah, so in that sense, you can embrace the freedom expression, academic freedom. Now, of course, but that's a kind of the basics, a prerequisite for anything. That's a foundation of the civilized state society.
Okay, so I think that we will thank Professor Wakatabe for this fascinating presentation.
Thank you.